What was the worst teacher you ever had in school and what did they do? I had a teacher who hated me. To the best of my knowledge, I never did anything to make her feel that way at first. Or if I did, it was something stupid and petty. Not being the type to enjoy being hated, I made her life as difficult as I could without breaking rules. Then this itch starts telling me I'm not turning in homework assignments. Are you serious? I handed it to you yesterday, same time as everyone else. Principal calls my parents about me apparently just not trying. So they yell at me for a while and sit with me every night for 2 weeks while I do my stupid homework. Then this genius lady tells me again that I need to start doing homework or I'm gonna fail the class. This message ends up with the principal. And ends up with my parents. Now they didn't believe me before this point. But now they knew I was doing my homework. And something fishy was going on. My mom asked to meet with the teacher. We go to this parent-teacher meetup. And she's sitting there all smug. She tells my mom he isn't doing his homework. My mom fires back, I know he is. I've been making sure he has. Well, then he must be choosing not to turn it in. Or maybe he's just not doing the homework for this class. Do you help him with the work we're doing right now? I'll show you the assignment. She grabs a folder, opens it up, and right on top is my ungraded assignment. It's got my name on the top in big ol' letters. My mom notices too and snatched it. Gave the teacher a look. And got up and walked down the hall to the principal's office. I had never seen a teacher look so much like they had just sheet the bed. It was incredible. Anyway. She finished out the school year. But was not present the next year. I guess there were a lot of issues with her. In 6th grade. My English class was starting the Holocaust unit. To help us understand the impact of it. She told us some stories from survivors of the Holocaust. During one story about a person's experience in a concentration camp. I started crying because it reminded me of my Cambodian grandparents who had been held in labor camps by the Khmer Rouge. My teacher immediately became pissed and yelled at me, accusing me of making fun of the Holocaust. When I told her my grandparents had died in camps, she called me an attention seeker and told me that this unit was not about me. It really broke my heart, considering she had been one of my favorite teachers until that point. I couldn't understand why she thought I was lying and how she could have ever thought I was seeking attention by talking about it. Just thinking about it makes me so upset. My English teacher passed out a test once and said, "Now, kids, let's not be like me and only score a 65 on this exam. Gee, thanks. And duck you, too." My Algebra 2 class freshman year of high school was taught by a really dull English woman. She told us that she started teaching because it seemed easy. All she would do is turn off all the lights and read the textbook to us every day. I had it first period, so naturally it became my mid-morning nap. I still wish I had learned Algebra 2 though. 1. In 5th grade I missed school for a while because I had either tonsillitis or strep every 3 months. Eventually got my tonsils removed. My math teacher made me stay inside for recess to make up homework. Then screamed at my big sister. The high school had a big brother big sister program. When she tried to help me on questions I was stuck on, she sent my big sister out of the room and I started crying. She told me to shut up and do my work. 2. 7th grade. My choir teacher was this bitter, racist old lady who screamed at us daily and said we would never get anywhere in life. Turned into an absolute sweetheart whenever the main choir teacher came by for a visit. None of the administration believed my class when we kept reporting her until the end of the year, when students recorded her on their phones and submitted it for proof. She was promptly fired. 3. My high school choir teacher was emotionally abusive. Lectured us daily on all the things we did wrong. Made me have a panic attack once because I missed one rehearsal for an AP test. Even some of the other teachers were wary of him. They finally had someone else take his job after 50 years of teaching choir. Now he's an assistant director. MRS. Capital J. Sophomore English. First day of class. She stated outright, "I don't give A's." For this reason, kids who cared about being valedictorian always got their parents to transfer them out of MRS J's class. She made damn sure that work was graded low enough that nobody could earn an A. Because I guess she prided herself on being that teacher. Totally ruined literature for me for a long time. I ended up getting my love for words back. And eventually became a writer, who runs an online used bookstore as a side hustle. But I will never forget how incredibly hard MRS J tried, year after year, to break students simply because she could. It was a long time ago. And I sincerely hope that she's rotting away in the world's worst nursing home somewhere. I took forensics in high school, 12th grade, and the teacher was horrible at teaching. She used pre-made PowerPoints and tests. And then when giving the tests, there would be questions that she never gave us notes on. When people started asking questions and saying "you never taught us this," she would say it wasn't hard and to give it our best shot. Then once enough kids spoke up, she got embarrassed and gave us the answer. The class was so horrible it kind of inspired me to go to college for education so kids don't have to deal with shit teachers like her. My maths teacher had a breakdown mid-lesson, tore her wig off and stormed out the room. We didn't know she wore a wig. In hindsight, it was rather a dramatic way to draw attention to it. M's. Capital K. I'll never forget her. She was an absolute monster. I was about 4 years old and had spent the early years of my life speaking only Korean. I had never spoken a single bit of English in my life, and the language barrier between me and my pre-K teacher seemed to have sparked a toxic relationship. I remember her yelling at me to do something as she threw my coat at me. Me being only 4 years old and unable to understand her, broke down and ran out of the room only to be comforted by the secretary. In another instance, we were given lunch and were told we had to finish everything before we could get up and go outside. I had picked up some English by this point. I had never seen anything more foul than the steamed green beans that were presented in front of me, and of course, since I was told to eat them, I did. I proceeded to vomit into my cup of milk, which sweet old Mrs. K forced me to drink since that did not count as finishing my vegetables. The list goes on and on, like the time I cut my finger on a staple on the ground and she just ignored me the entire time as I bawled my eyes out. Of course, Mrs. K was always sweet to my mom whenever she came to get me. I took years until I told my mom. I thought every kid had gone through the same thing. My 5'2" Korean mother absolutely flipped her sheet. I remember her furiously calling the school. But alas, Mrs. K had left after I moved on to elementary school. I remember growing up when physical punishment was allowed. I still remember my 3rd grade teacher who would line up students who did not do homework or didn't do well on exams front of the whole class. She grabbed the side hair front of the ear, then yanked it up and down while yelling, "Do better. Work harder." If we screamed or cried, she would hit us on the palm of our hands with a thin wooden stick, then told the crying ones to wash the faces and come back when they calmed down. This was more harsh towards boys. She made me fear teachers in general. I remember when I came to the States, my parents were called to the school when I flinched when a teacher raised her hand near me. The school thought that I was being physically abused at home. I wasn't. But I thought that the teacher was about to hit me. My divorced single mom family moved to a small town when I was in 2nd grade. My dad was a severe alcoholic. But people didn't know that yet. There was a boy who was always dressed in weird combinations of hand-me-downs. And he acted out sometimes. When I asked about him, people said he was messed up. And his parents were drunks. One day there was some sort of altercation because we had to hand in a family history thing with our parents' notes. And his was incomplete or ducked up. And he got mad and gave up. I stood up for him and told the teacher she was being awful. I had lied on my sheet because I was embarrassed about my family. But he had just told everyone what was what. I got a detention for standing up for him. And he got a 5-day suspension for arguing with the teacher and being nasty about saying what he knew about his family. That teacher had no clue about child abuse. When I was in first grade, I got in trouble for something in class. I don't remember what, but it was something trivial. Her punishment was to lock me in the dark classroom during lunch so I couldn't eat. Sheet was ducked up. Pretty sure that is illegal. Yeah, it is. The front office lady found me on the second or third time she did it. She didn't teach for long after that. In high school, I had a really hard time with math. Apparently my stupid brain just didn't get some of the concepts like imaginary numbers, grid plots and complicated algebra problems. My parents weren't super educated themselves in this sort of stuff either, so they couldn't help much. So because I didn't understand it, I never did my homework. The teacher routinely called me out in front of the class when handing in homework. I'd always say I didn't have it. And the teacher would say smartest things like, "Of course you don't." Right in front of the class. She'd embarrass me by calling on me to answer problems, which I obviously couldn't do. And at one point said, "If you don't understand this stuff by now, I'm not going to waste my time trying to teach it to you." I was too embarrassed to ask for help or tutoring for it because the teacher made me feel so stupid. On an opposite note, the best teacher I had was my high school senior chemistry teacher. It was kind of the same situation. But she didn't make me feel stupid in front of the class. She sat down with me after class one day and offered to sit and tutor me one-on-one every day during a study period so that I could pass. She took the time to explain things and answer questions so I could understand them. End of the year I aced my final exam. And it was because of her patience and willingness to take the extra step and teach me. High school English teacher. During discussion of a book I made a point about something. She dismissed it and we didn't discuss it. Like 3 weeks later, discussing the last chapter, she brought up my point and said something like, "Last year's class noticed it." My friends and I were dumbfounded. The whole year was an uphill battle for me and I couldn't get an A on anything I turned in. In the 4th grade I was abused at home and I had this horrible donkey witch for a teacher that used public shaming as a punishment. I was often covered in bruises. Under my clothes, of course, since my abuser was smart, smelly, and would act out by being loud and messy. She would often call me out for a black eye, telling me to clean up. Later in the year I began hoarding bits of food in my desk. A comfort thing I did for a bit. So she told my class that since I wanted to live in a dump I had to keep my belongings in a storage container and sit at a desk in the back corner of the classroom. The bullying got pretty bad after that. Duck you, Mrs. Delorge. I got a detention from a teacher for knowing something she didn't. We were learning about Japanese printmaking, art history class, and the text she was reading from mentioned Zen. Another kid asked what Zen was and the teacher didn't know. I piped up and told them it was a type of Buddhism from Japan. I had just been to Japan and visited a temple. Wasn't trying to be a big dig about it at all. Just trying to help out the other kid and was excited about sharing my trip. Teacher lost it at me. Kicked me out of class. And gave me a detention. She also taught art class and was terrible at that too. She just liked bossing kids around. Edit. Just learned that Zen originated in China. Cool. I was in a science lesson with a cover teacher when my friend knocked my pen on the floor. I proceeded to walk around to pick it up. And on the way back to my seat I accidentally hooked his bag on my foot and dragged it a short distance. Well, my teacher was having none of me maiming my friend's bag. And instructed me to get out. I asked why and she told me it was for kicking my friend's bag. I refused to leave and so she picked up my bags and threw them into the corridor where they hit the head of the science department. The cover teacher then blamed everything on me and so I got in heaps of trouble. I had a teacher who wouldn't let us go to the bathroom. It was nap time. And every single time I needed to use the bathroom, she wouldn't let me. It was absolutely terrible. My English teacher my freshman year of high school. She wasn't mean at all. In fact, she was very nice. Just completely and utterly incompetent. She taught us absolutely nothing and spent more time telling jokes. talking about crazy irrelevant thoughts she had, and being our friend. It was a huge disservice to us because it was a waste of time for kids that needed to learn. She was only there for a year and then was, I learned later, fired. My sophomore year, I entered honors English and had one of the best teachers I ever had. He started by quizzing us on what we should have learned the prior year, and we knew very little of what we should have known. He soon figured out that our previous teacher had taught us next to nothing. He was pissed. We had to do 2 years worth of work in 1 year. It was very hard but worth it. Whenever we would run across a subject we should know but didn't because of her, he would say sarcastically, but she was nice, and then teach us. I had him for English for the next 3 years and learned so much. I was more interested in science and math. I ended up becoming a computer engineer, yet I still loved learning from him. I have a love of language and literature that I carry to this day. I graduated from high school in 1989, which is the year Dead Poets Society came out. On our last day of class my senior year, we all we recreated a scene from that movie where we stood on our chairs and saluted him with "Oh Captain." My Captain. We respected him that much. He now has a Facebook fan page created by his former students. English and drama teacher. She would scream and bang the side of her metal podium if you messed up answering a question. She would also bully me in front of everyone if I messed up a line during play practice. When I decided to not do the musical senior year and had my parents tell her they wouldn't let me, total lie, she started lowering my English grade as punishment. It's been 7 years and I still have terrible nightmares about this woman to this day. In grade 5 my teacher decided the class should run every day. He would keep track of our cumulative total, which would, by the end of the year, be the equivalent as running across Canada. At the time I was a rather portly lad suffering with a case of plantar's warts on my left foot. Naturally, I would be one of the last kids to finish, usually alongside the less than athletic girls in the class. There wasn't a day go by where he wouldn't tease me for finishing last. "Here come the girls," he would say. Should I ever present a note to get out of running, because I had gotten a treatment on my warts, he would tease me and make me feel guilty for letting down the class. At the end of the year, having reached our goal, we were supposed to have a party to celebrate our achievement. He decided we didn't deserve a party since he didn't think everyone gave their all. What a bastard. I hated that guy. Worst teacher I ever had. My second grade teacher. She told me I would grow up to smoke pot and make nothing of my life. Ironically, about 10 years later I was sitting in her living room smoking pot with her granddaughter who was older than me. She realized who I was when I said, "Hi Miss Esp." On her first day of subbing she did roll call. I said, "That's my name, don't wear it out," or something like that. She went ballistic and sent me to the principal's office, who found it hilarious. She of course picked on me the whole time after that, asking me weird religious questions that I never got cause I went to Catholic school but was from a non-religious family. She also kept calling me a Satanist and stuff and said she wouldn't pray for me. Weird women. About 6 years later I ducked her hot daughter. MRS. Gross in 3rd grade, yes, her real name. She have a surprise test on what we learned on a field trip the day before. No one passed. It was the only class I got a B in throughout my school career. Minus college. I blew that on my own. MRS. First. She was pretty much a tamer version of Mrs. Trunchbull. She yelled constantly at us and just overall sucked at teaching. She cornered me once in the hallway for something stupid and I got in school suspension for flipping her off. The person that suspended me told me he didn't blame me but he had to do his job. I was president of the honor society and was pretty much a teacher's pet, so everyone was really surprised at me. I had a teacher that hated more than anything in the world if we crumpled paper when we put it in the trash can. 3 weeks into the school year he came back in and we all threw it in. He karate kicked the trash can over all of us and it hit the wall. The guy had no patience with 5th graders and clearly hated all of us even if we tried. I had a primary school teacher who used to call me an idiot. He would actually call me an idiot in class, and say I was lazy and wouldn't pass school or go anywhere. One day after an assignment that I didn't do, he actually asked our class why should we not study like Holly? All because I didn't like doing homework or studying. The sheet thing was that my parents agreed with him and they gave me hell for not doing homework. I thought I didn't need to practice the stupid stuff I already knew. Well, I proved them wrong when I got the third best result in the country for my leaving exam. And now my parents agree that he was a big dick. A few years too late. Worst thing was, I was no way the worst person in my class for not doing homework or study. There were many people worse than me. For some reason I just got singled out semicolon. He saw me get bullied in 3rd grade and didn't lift a finger. He told me to go away and to stop being a cribby when I went to him with tears in my eyes. That's the one methodica I gladly duck up even if I have to face the charges. My 2nd grade teacher, Mrs. Johnson, was pretty strict with us. And I feel she didn't like me because she knew my family. My dad and mother weren't by any means the best role models. I was feeling kind of sick this day. And I told her that at the beginning of class, we had this little program that we did, where a different student would bring in snacks each day. So my grandma helped me bake some cookies. I was holding 3 trays of them that I kept in our school's cafeteria. When walking into the classroom door, I started feeling sick. I asked her if people could just take the cookies and if I could go to the bathroom, which she gave a bold no to. What ended up happening was me throwing up on this tray of cookies in front of the whole class. From a sudden wave of sickness. Embarrassing. But I went to the principal after cleaning up and explained that she wouldn't let me use the restroom while I was sick. She wasn't a very friendly teacher and didn't last long at my school either. My 4th grade teacher, Mr. Johnson, had us make Christmas ornaments. I was Jewish and there was zero taught on anything except Christmas. Keep in mind this was the early 80s and in a town where we were the only Jewish family. I made a menorah ornament. He told me to redo it and I said no. He gave me an F for not following instructions properly. My parents came in and it was resolved. Then he won Teacher of the Year that year in the school district. Probably my grade 9 math teacher. I was doing really bad in math and my mom asked the teacher if there are any particular habits that I'm doing which is leading me to do bad in math. His response: "What part of the year was he born?" "Oh, October?" Since that's later into the year, his brain might not be as developed as the other children. Actually, a teacher I currently have. She teaches this media arts class and is explicitly horrible. The lessons are unclear every time we move to a new unit, so no one really learns anything of value. At one point we had to learn design principles and art elements. Although this may sound useful, we're seniors in high school. And we've already taken art in middle school, so we're well aware of them already. Then about 2 weeks later we spent an entire block. We have blocks instead of periods, they are 80 minutes instead of the regular sized periods, reviewing them. And currently we're developing our own advertisements. Which may not seem bad except we've spent 2 full days just making thumbnails, rough drafts, and then today we finally started on our rough drafts. When we'll actually start designing them in InDesign I have no clue. Oh, that's another thing. For all the Adobe programs we're using, she shows a few clips that are the most basic tutorial on how to use the program, but she shows them on this TV all the way across the room which you can't see or hear. Which are both really important as we're all fairly unfamiliar with Adobe software. Freshman year of high school history teacher. His lesson plans were just reading from the book. Anytime you asked a question he couldn't answer it directly. He always scanned the chapter to find the answer. Tests were word for word. The end of the chapter study questions from the book.